live from Mumbai, London, and Brussels. It's ZN Live. We're very excited today to have an EU influencer, David Henig, who is an expert on a range of topics, ranging from the UK to Europe to trade and policy. And he's obviously very active on Twitter, and he has many interesting ideas and insights to share with us. But because of his UK connection, obviously, I can't resist to ask David, how are things going in the UK with your new Prime Minister, and how is that blowing up on Twitter?
We are in the midst of a Twitter storm, which means nobody is getting any work done here whatsoever. Every day, I tell you how it was. Yesterday at around 13:30, the Prime Minister Liz Truss announced her resignation. At 14:43, the first report came through on Twitter that Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, was going to stand again. We had 1 hour and 13 minutes of calm before everything kicked off. And today it's just as bad again. We had this before with Liz Truss. We've had weeks of it. I mean, even stepping away to do this for 15, 20 minutes, I'm not on Twitter. Many things might have happened in the whole time that I'm doing that. We're literally living from kind of minute to minute on this, and the more that is going out there in the UK, I do note that we're getting global cut through. People are interested. Mainly, they're interested because they think we're all going completely mad. But they are interested. The world is watching. It's pretty crazy times, actually. I'd kind of like to get some work done.
Yeah, I think it's like politics and comedy and chaos brought together, which actually, I think comedy has been a very British characteristic. So we're seeing politics combining with that. Now, I want to ask you something, because, there are these hashtags that popped out, Boris or bust, or anyone but Boris. And I'm just wondering, I think it's Jacob Rees-Mogg who started the Boris or bust hashtag. Do you think he's actually engineering the campaign from behind the scenes, or there's something more planned going on?
Yeah, no, I doubt he would be the engineering it. I'm not sure who did the Boris or bust, whether he was the first one to do it. I didn't check that through, but there's clearly a lot of this sort of stuff going on in the different campaigns. People getting the graphics already. It's not come as a surprise as a leadership election. There would have been a lot of people doing an amount of preparation. You've got a big community of folk behind the scenes in Westminster, in politics, just waiting to put this sort of stuff out. And so when the intensity reaches as it is now, you've got a lot of people who are just preparing these graphics, trying to make an impact on social media, using MPs. I guess this is a moment of fame as well for certain MPs. So it all becomes that old idea of the media storm or the Twitter storm. That's what we've got going on here, and it very much is being played out on Twitter, probably more than it is being played out on certainly the traditional media. Even the 24-hour news media are struggling to keep up with what's happening on Twitter, where you get the news, you get the analysis, you get the graphics, you get the campaigning teams. You're getting it all coming together on social media.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually, it's kind of the perfect Twitter storm, given that basically the time frame is so incredibly short. I mean, you could have a prime minister by Monday, a new prime minister, and essentially, everybody is trying to get their idea, their candidate, their story to shape the way things are happening. I mean, how much of an impact on the outcome do you think what happens on Twitter is going to have?
Look, that's a huge question about Twitter. Does Twitter really matter? Is it really representative? On the one hand, you've got people who say, no, Twitter's not representative. It's all the kind of centrist. It's the centre left. It doesn't really reflect broad UK public opinion. On the other hand, you've got all these news breaking. You've got the analysis going on. You've got Conservative MPs coming out on Twitter saying we're going to resign from the Conservative Party if Boris Johnson becomes leader. I think it's impossible to say that Twitter doesn't have any influence here. Whether it has enough influence that it'll make a difference on the outcome, I doubt it. I think Twitter reflects, it amplifies. I'm not sure it changes outcomes, but it increases the intensity of it more than it's going to change. I think that whoever wins will win, especially if this goes to a members' vote for the Conservative Party. Most of those are not on Twitter. Many of them are in the aging population segments who probably aren't using social media that much. True. But the media, the traditional media, use it a lot.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there is a conversation, and you know, if you go back to if you take a step back, the equation, information is power. You know, wherever you get the information first, that might dictate what you see, what you're exposed to, and it might plant ideas in your mind. I think, you know, the entire discussion around the US election in 2016, how Trump used digital channels to get his message out to his followers without depending on traditional media, I think demonstrates that it can have an impact. Often people prefer to focus on the negative impact than I would say the positive conversations. But in general, have you seen, you know, Twitter and social media in general and the web having an impact in shaping policy in your experience, you know, not just in the UK and in the EU?
I mean, I think it, look, it's one of many factors that plays. And I think, let's take an example from a few weeks ago. The first part of Liz Truss's program as Prime Minister, she was going to do something about supply side reforms. And it wasn't clear what these were, but suddenly you get a lot of environmental groups taking to Twitter and launching campaigns there. You get that from the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the National Trust, pretty established and not necessarily considered radical groups taking to social media in a way that, you know, their campaigns really amplify. And I think that campaigns of that sort make, you know, social media really makes a difference to them. I think that, you know, I came into Twitter and I came into a lot of EU trade politics during TTIP when we were negotiating between the US and the EU a potential trade deal that didn't happen. And again, you saw the amount of pressure that was put on via social media from, if you like, other voices. So what I think it does is it brings a lot of other voices into the debate. It makes it a lot harder for politicians and officials to control the debate as they would like. And I think that's the case with UK politics as well, when something takes off in that way. At other times, and it's just, you know, you may get the more traditional, certainly we did at some points, you had little bits of policy debate where policymakers themselves would be on Twitter engaging with a varied group of stakeholders, critics, people from other countries, you name it. I don't see that so much anymore. I think we've moved on a little bit from there. I think it's more now about amplifying, about media pickup. I think that Twitter is not used so much for policy debates in 2022. Are we still in 2022? I'm losing track of years.
It's COVID. We don't know about time anymore.
Yeah, we don't know what year it is.
So tell me, what is it that you use Twitter for the most? Because you have obviously a large following. You're quite involved in your topic. So what's the thing that you get most out of Twitter, and what do you focus on when you use it?
Well, I use it in a number of different ways. I try to put out ideas, whether that's ideas about trade policy, UK or EU, ideas about globalization, what's going on in the world, just interpretations, thoughts. It's great for me that you don't have to sort of develop them into article form. You can throw them out. It's great if people have feedback, but often you don't get that much feedback. I'd like more feedback. Certainly amplification of articles. So I write every week or two, often about trade politics, often EU trade politics. So people will see that because I'm putting that on Twitter. I write in other forms as well. So I'm using it for that. I'm obviously using it as a source of news, like so many people are doing as well. But yeah, not as much as I'd like in terms of policy discussion. I'd like more of that, but we won't get so much of that. But in general, you know, it's also a calling card. Look, I got some ideas, so I will get the odd commission for articles from somebody who will say, "Oh, I saw that. Would you like to write that at more length?" And that's great when that happens. Just had one Earlier this week, I published an article on growth that came from a Twitter thread. It's great if I can stretch that out. If somebody sees it and says, "Hey, we could pick up on that," it often doesn't happen, and that's one of the reasons I just, keep plugging away at it. Is that you have to put quite a lot in to get anything out of it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it's that, it allows you to put ideas in front of people. You said sharing policy ideas. And, you might just have picked up an idea just because you saw it a few times and then you digged into it and then you went deeper and started exploring that topic. I mean, however you pick up the idea, whether it's on TV or in the news. But the thing about social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, or any other channel, is that you can spread your ideas. And I think, people like you with a significant following are able to then, kind of push them to a larger ecosystem, and some of them might get some traction. That the kind of the tweets that get more traction, and it might land in front of the right commissioner or the right policy person who starts thinking, hey, this is interesting. I want to find out more. Have you ever had conversations that started from a Twitter conversation and then led to a face-to-face or kind of more or a detailed policy debate?
Real life all the time. I make it a business. If people are really going to engage, at some point I am going to say, let's carry this conversation on in offline. Let's actually let's meet up and chat about it. I have had people, whether in Brussels or London, saying that was interesting. Can we talk further about that? It doesn't happen. I mean, naturally, it doesn't happen for every tweet you put out or anything like that. You don't necessarily know what you're putting out that might spark any interest. It's I'd like to say I knew what the secret was. I don't think there is a secret. You'll put stuff out that you really care about. Earlier this morning I was doing some stuff about globalization in response to an FT article. No great pickup, but you keep plugging away on that and people will pick it up. I guess there's not so many people thinking about that in comparison to many of my followers are either going to be people in detail focusing on the UK or in detail focusing on trade policy. We don't necessarily get much feedback.
Yeah, and I think it's a way to connect to that ecosystem, because obviously it's easy for people to follow the people that they're interested in and have specific topics that they want to connect with over. Now, and I think the secret to all of these things is basically to just do it and to keep practicing it. And that's what we see with a lot of EU influencers, is that they basically know their topics, they spend time sharing ideas, and they basically keep helping people understanding the topic and being directed to good articles. And if you trust the person, you'll obviously find the article. There's
an important point to that, I think, which is that I've got the attitude that I've not got too many secrets. I'm not sort of holding on for the great book I'm going to write or the great paper I'm going to write or something like that. It's kind of I'm just going to throw these out there. Not everything, because you don't want to cover everything. You want to stick roughly to within your lanes. You occasionally move out because you can do that. But there's an attitude of openness. All right, I'm just going to use this as a channel of ideas, a channel of thoughts. I'm going to come to it. I'll do a few tweets. I'll go off for an hour or two, do something else, come back. Pick them up. Let's have some more thoughts. See what somebody else has written. Respond a little bit. It is a classic form of communications. But one, you need to be working pretty hard at it, just like you've got to continually talk to colleagues if you were in an office like that. Here on Twitter, it's the same sort of idea.
Yeah, I think it's a basic stream of consciousness where you can connect with the outside world. I have to ask you, Elon Musk buying Twitter, how concerned are you? How excited are you? Hate it, love it?
Well, look, if there was no Twitter, and if it splinters into 50 different pieces, I think that for somebody like myself who uses it a lot for spreading ideas, I think that'll be a real problem. We've become used to it, and there's not really an alternate. So yes, you've got to be concerned that let's say it gets much worse again on hate speech, more people are driven off Twitter, and it already has enough of a problem in that sense. And I'm fully aware that as a middle-aged white man, I get nothing like the level of abuse that a large number of other people get on Twitter. It could get worse. It could get to a point it's unusable, and then I'm concerned that where do we go from there? LinkedIn's not a particularly great alternative. We'll have to go back to actually face-to-face talking. I already do a lot of face-to-face talking with people, but it's going to lose something if we don't have this kind of service that brings together experts, media, the interested, etc.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is people will continue to try different channels and different tools, so we'll have something there. But I think Twitter has created a specific space that I think is particularly interesting, for the community that uses it and the way we use it. There was actually a nice piece that I tweeted from the FT, which describes the benefits of Twitter and all the good things you get out of it, which is often, people like to focus on all the negatives about social media. And I think, it emphasizes finding these ideas, having positive discussions. It's not all about abuse. It's not all about hate. There's actually a lot of good, positive, constructive things happening on Twitter.
Yeah, I just think that it's also dependent on the institutions and what form they're in. I have found that in the last couple of years, I think the EU Twitter conversation has quietened down a little bit. And I'm not sure that's necessarily for the good. I came into Twitter as a policy tool, and I just fear that we're not quite there with the EU. I can't remember the last time I saw a really good EU trade Twitter conversation. They're using it more as just an output channel rather than a collaboration, a communication both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So more conversations, I think, needed there. So it's time for our recommendations. So recommendations. Great. So David, you have a recommendation for our audience?
I do, but unusually it's not a book, it's not a podcast. It's 2 words. It's the new idea that's kind of sweeping around my corner of academia and think tankery, and it's called Weaponized Interdependence. Just keep an eye out for this. This is the idea that the US, the EU, China, we know we're all interdependent, and we are now working out how we use that for maximum opportunity. And it has the potential, this concept, the way people are behaving, to kind of change the world that we're living in, and not, for good and for bad. And I think there'll be a lot more discussions on this to come. And there's a couple of guys who are associated with this. Henry Farrell is one. Is one. I've just followed him on Twitter, and Abraham Newman, I think, is the other. So, but yeah, Weaponized Interdependence. You may or may not have heard it here first.
Is there a hashtag for that, or are we just?
I don't think there is. No. I think you've got there's just a few things. It's say we're right at the start, I think, of this becoming a bigger idea, taking over from deglobalization.
So, Lior, your recommendation of the week?
Yes, I have a bit of a recommendation, especially for people like David who feel like, oh, I'm missing 20 minutes of this, everything that's going on in the UK, and people like myself who are glued to everything that's happening in Iran. And if you just want to decompose for a little and need a break, I strongly recommend 2 different. Well, I recommend mostly the Violin Concerto that Sibelius wrote, and then specifically when Itzhak Perlman is playing this. It's absolutely beautiful. It's technical. I play the violin, but that is one piece that I could never master. It's my sister can. She's a real violinist, and that's her profession. And it's just beautiful. He was Finnish, of course. His real name was Sibyl, and but he Romanized it as they did in those days, and that's why he's Sibelius. And when you listen to the beginning of the piece, it's like you're in a Finnish forest, and then it gets more complex as it goes with the orchestra building up. And it's just if you listen to that whole piece, you do nothing else. You close your eyes, you just let the music come in. Ideally, of course, listen to it in a beautiful music hall like the Concert Building in Amsterdam. And I think we all need that from time to time, just a little bit away from a little time away from politics. That was my real good recommendation. I also have this book. It's called That Doesn't Mean What You Think It Does. It's quite a good book for people who are real perfectionists when it comes to language. It has a lot of words that seem to be the same. They get people get confused about them a lot. Like I'm trying to find a good some good examples. Sorry, I'm not very fluent today. Like farther and further, facetious and sarcastic, enormity and enormous, emigrate and immigrate. Well, that's easier. Illicit and illicit, etc., etc. That's not two different words. This is me saying the same word twice. So that's a good book if you're interested and you don't want to make any mistakes. That I found it fun to read as well. So if you want to be correct in your language, that doesn't mean what you think it does.
Fantastic. I think that's probably a good Twitter hashtag that you can follow too. So my book is The Unfair Advantage. Is actually a book written by Ash Hassan Ali Kuba, actually two authors, and it's about the things that you have that naturally allow you to be better or to have advantages that you might not like or you might not be aware of. And it's great for people starting their career, building their first business or something like that. It's just understand what you can make work for you, because it's for your background, your culture, the things you know, the things you have. So being conscious of that, I think it's very useful. So that is all we have time for. David, thank you so much for your insights, and thank you for sharing your tweets with the world at large. And looking forward to continuing our discussion online. Have a fantastic weekend. And from Mumbai, happy Diwali, because it's Diwali for the next couple of days.
Happy Diwali.
Weekend. Thank you. Happy Diwali to you too.
Thank you, David.
Bye. Thank you.